My name is Elena, and from wherever you're listening, I want to ask you something. Have you ever sat at a table full of people who share your blood, yet felt like a stranger with no seat? Have you ever smiled not because you were happy, but because it was expected? That was Christmas in our family. Polished silverware, choreographed small talk. Laughter so perfectly timed, it sounded like a soundtrack. But behind the twinkle lights and carefully folded napkins, there were things we didn't say, truths we avoided, questions wrapped tighter than any gift under the tree. I had come back that year with little more than a thrift store coat and a bottle of wine I could barely afford. No degree, no job title worth bragging about, just a quiet hope that maybe, for once, I wouldn't feel like the afterthought. So I smiled, I took my seat, I let them pass the plates. I played along. Until Grandma raised her glass. And with one offhand comment, meant as a joke, she cracked open everything they'd spent years trying to hide. It happened just as the roast came out of the oven. The candles were flickering. Someone had started humming a Christmas tune. The cranberry sauce had finally stopped sliding across the plate. Then Grandma, always the one to say too much with a smile, raised her glass of wine. She looked at me, smirked a little, and said, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Well, good thing your parents paid off those student loans, huh?" People laughed, light chuckles, a few glances in my direction, but I didn't laugh. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. I blinked once, maybe twice. Then I asked quietly, "What loans?" No one answered. My mom's hand trembled. Her glass tipped and wine spilled onto the tablecloth. A deep red stain spread across the white linen like something blooming that wasn't supposed to. Dad dropped his fork. It hit the plate too hard. My sister looked up but said nothing. And just like that, the room fell quiet, not the comfortable kind of silence. The kind that rings in your ears. The kind where no one wants to be the first to speak. I looked around the table, at every face that had pretended to love me. At the people who once told me they just couldn't help with college, that times were hard, that I had to be strong, but their eyes weren't confused. They were guilty. And suddenly I knew they hadn't forgotten something. They had hidden it. That night I couldn't sleep. While everyone else passed around dessert and half-finished jokes, I just sat there, smiling, nodding, pretending I didn't feel like I was standing at the edge of something too big to name. I kept hearing her voice. Good thing your parents paid off those student loans. But I had dropped out sophomore year. I never finished. I couldn't afford it. I worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on in my apartment. I ate dollar store ramen and skipped doctor visits because I didn't have insurance. When I asked my parents for help back then, they looked tired. Said they wished they could. Told me they were still covering expenses for my sister. That I was the strong one, the independent one, the one who would figure it out. So I did. I dropped out. I stopped dreaming, and I told myself it was just life. But now I was beginning to wonder if it had been more than that. Not just neglect, not just favoritism, but something colder. I waited until the house was quiet, went into the guest room and pulled out my old laptop. I logged into my old loan account, the one I stopped checking years ago. And there it was, active, open, tens of thousands still owed. Payments had been made, but not by me. My stomach turned. I clicked through every record, every transaction, every name. Then I saw it. Study abroad program, Paris. Spring semester. Elena Ward, except I never studied in Paris. I never even applied, but I knew who did. I stared at the screen, trying to breathe. Paris. My name, tuition payments, airfare, housing, everything filed under me, except I had never been to Paris. I had never even left the country. But I knew someone who had. My sister, Madeline. I remembered the Instagram photos. Café au lait on marble tables. Tulips in street markets. The Eiffel Tower glowing behind her perfectly tousled hair. Captions like "grateful for this life" and "work hard, dream big." She had told everyone she got a scholarship. Said it was a merit-based cultural immersion program. Now I knew the truth. She was sipping champagne in Montmartre, while I was working double shifts to cover bills under her name. My loans, my credit, my future, they didn't just use my name. They erased my struggle and built her dream on top of it. I clicked deeper into the loan documents. Found signatures that looked familiar but not mine. Email addresses linked to our home internet account. Emergency contact fields filled in with my parents' phone number. This wasn't an accident, it wasn't one mistake. It was a system, a plan, something that had been set in motion while I was too busy surviving to notice. They didn't just leave me behind. They used me as a foundation and never thought I'd come back to check. And now, I wasn't sure what hurt more. The betrayal, or the quiet realization that no one had ever planned for me to succeed. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table watching her. Madeline floated through the room like she always did. Silk robe, flawless curls, the soft clink of a spoon against her mug, like nothing touched her, like the world owed her softness. She glanced at me and smiled. "You didn't eat much last night," she said, pouring oat milk into her imported cereal. "I wasn't that hungry," I replied, and maybe that was true. Or maybe I just didn't have the stomach to sit across from someone who drank lattes bought with my debt. She had lived in Paris. She had worn linen dresses in lavender fields. She had posted stories with violin music and sun-drenched rooftops. And I had scrubbed bathroom tiles in silence, counted quarters for laundry, turned off the heater in winter to keep the power bill down. They gave her a passport and took my name to pay for it. And when I asked for help, they said, "We're stretched thin, be patient, your time will come." But it never did, because for them I was the fallback, the quiet one, the one who didn't make demands, the one they could build on without ever asking permission. I looked at Madeline that morning, really looked at her. And for the first time, I didn't feel envy. I felt clarity. She wasn't lucky. She was protected. And I was the cost. I waited until the house was quiet. No guests. No Christmas music humming from the Bluetooth speaker, just the ticking of the old kitchen clock and the faint smell of leftover cinnamon. Dad was reading the paper. Mom was rinsing dishes, humming softly like nothing had happened. I sat down and folded my hands on the table. They looked up. "I checked the loan account last night," I said. My voice was even, too even, no reaction at first. Just two practiced faces, blank with caution. Then Dad cleared his throat. "Sweetheart, let's not ruin the holiday." "It's not ruined," I said. "It was never mine to begin with." Mom stopped moving. The dish towel in her hand went still. "You took out federal loans under my name," I said. "For Madeline's program, the study abroad in Paris. Housing, flights, tuition, it's all there." "Silence, I didn't co-sign it," I added. "But you did." Dad leaned back slowly, eyes on the window like the truth might blow past him if he didn't look at it. Mom finally whispered, "You were always so capable. We thought you'd catch up eventually." Catch up as if I had tripped, as if they hadn't pulled the ground out from under me. "I didn't come here to beg," I said, "and I'm not here to fight." They looked confused, worried. People who had always counted on my silence now hearing my voice for the first time. "I just wanted you to know I know." That was all. I stood, pushed in the chair, and left the room with nothing but the weight of my own name finally back in my hands. I packed that night. No drama, no raised voices, just the soft sound of a zipper closing over a life I never really belonged to. The guest room had always been cold. Too many beige pillows, a lamp that flickered when you turned it on. But somehow, it felt warmer than the rest of the house. I folded my clothes carefully, tucked my laptop into the side pocket of my suitcase. The same suitcase I had brought with me when I dropped out of college, when I moved into my first shared apartment, when I worked those long, thankless shifts to stay afloat. It had carried my disappointment for years. Now, it would carry my clarity. Outside, the sky was still dressed in stars. The neighborhood was quiet. Christmas lights blinked across fences and hedges like they had every year. I didn't leave a note, didn't slam a door, didn't make them feel what I had felt, because I knew they wouldn't understand it anyway. When I stepped into the cold air and pulled the door shut behind me, I realized something. I wasn't walking away from them. I was walking back to myself. Starting over wasn't glamorous. There were no montages, no big wins, no overnight glow-ups, Just early mornings, long hours, and a lot of silence. But it was my silence now. And that made all the difference. I found a small apartment outside the city, nothing fancy, peeling paint, thin walls, but it was mine. Paid for with my own hours, not someone else's lies. I picked up a second job. Finished community college classes at night. I didn't post about it, didn't announce anything. I just did the work. And slowly, I started seeing her again. The girl I was before they clipped my future to someone else's comfort. She came back piece by piece. In the way I cooked dinner for one. In the way I lit a candle before bed. In the way I read poetry again, out loud to no one. Some days were hard. The debt was still there. The anger still flared up, uninvited. But I reminded myself, I wasn't rebuilding to be seen. I was rebuilding to be free. I wasn't chasing their approval anymore. I was designing a life that didn't require it. And for the first time in years, I could finally hear myself think. It was almost a year later when the email came, from my mother. Subject line, urgent, please respond. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. It was polite, formal, even, they needed my signature. Something about the loan. Some paperwork. A form only I, as the primary borrower, could legally submit. They didn't say sorry, didn't ask how I was doing. Didn't mention Christmas, or Paris, or anything in between, just a request, wrapped in desperation. Thinly veiled behind bureaucratic language, I didn't reply. A few days later, a voicemail from Dad. Calm, then pleading. He used words like family and obligation and we're in this together. But we were, not really. We hadn't been in anything together for years. They had chosen who to invest in, chosen who to carry, and who to count on. And now, they needed the very name they once used without permission. To save themselves, I didn't yell, didn't expose them, didn't ruin their reputation or show up uninvited to their holidays. I just stayed silent. Because silence, when it comes from someone who's been quiet too long, is not absence, it's power. They thought they took something from me, a future, a diploma, a sense of direction. But what they gave me, without knowing, was something harder to earn, a clear view of the truth. They showed me exactly where I stood, not through anger, not through rejection, but through quiet choices made when they thought I wasn't looking. And once you see clearly, you can't unsee. I used to think I needed their permission to become someone. Now I know, I never did, I was already someone. They just chose not to see it. They gave me debt, but they also gave me clarity. They gave me silence, but they taught me to listen to my own voice. I don't hate them, I'm not waiting for an apology. Because the apology I needed came from me. The moment I stopped begging to belong, some lessons cost more than money. Mine came with years of doubt and a name I had to reclaim, but it was worth it. Because today I wake up with nothing to prove. No mask to wear at dinner. No hunger for approval that tastes like shame. Just me. Free. And finally, home, in a place they never built, but I did.